show here. Buckle up. Today, we're talking about the guest list. The guest list conversation is as equally important as the budget conversation and needs to be taking place simultaneously. It is a very important conversation that needs to be had in the very early stages of the planning process for a number of reasons. Mainly because you need to know a pretty good count of what you plan to have at your wedding so that your budget can be set around that expected guest list, and you can ensure that the venue that you select can hold that many people. Where people get themselves in trouble is that they will go ahead and commit to a venue without having a hard number on their guest list. And that venue, they may be pretty close to the capacity based on what they've already estimated as far as putting together. And then months go by and you start getting deeper into the planning process. And once you start putting that hard guest list together and talking with all the different people who are going to be inviting people, you start to realize that there's quite a few people that were not initially thought about when it came to the guest list. And now you realize that you're 40, 50, 60 people higher than you initially anticipated, and now you're exceeding the capacity at that venue. So at that point, you now have to say, who are you going to cut? There's so many different opinions on who should be invited and who shouldn't be invited when it comes to your wedding invite list. One of the first parts of the conversation that you need to have when it comes to the guest list is whether or not you and your spouse plan to have children attend the wedding. This can be a controversial conversation depending on the ages and the number of children that possibly would be in attendance, could determine whether or not you do or don't want children at the wedding. Another factor could be the type of wedding you plan to have. If you're having more of a sit-down, formal, plated meal, it may not be conducive for children, depending on their ages, to sit for such a lengthy period of time. This is a personal conversation that you and your spouse are going to need to have with each other, be on the same page and have an understanding, because more than likely there is someone in your immediate family that will have a child, and if you choose to not have children attend your wedding, that may be a conversation that you need to have with the family member that has the child so that you can personally explain to them your take on having children at the wedding and avoid any unnecessary drama when it comes to that. Once you decide whether children are going to be or not going to be part of your wedding day, then it moves on to what adults will be included in your wedding day. When it comes to immediate family, all family should be invited as far as siblings and parents are concerned. Next should be your closest friends that you see on a regular basis, maybe every other weekend, every weekend, daily, whatever it is. Your best friends, your closest friend group should always be invited to your wedding. Outside of your immediate family and close friend group, if you choose to have a larger size wedding and you want to invite additional aunts and uncles, cousins, coworkers, neighbors, and so on, that becomes a conversation that you need to have amongst everyone who will be doing some inviting, because at that point you need to set some limits and boundaries as far as who is going to be invited and how many from each family is going to be invited, because again, you have to be very careful about not reaching capacity and staying within your allotted budget. Oftentimes, families feel obligated to inviting other distant family members that they haven't seen in many years only because of the fact that they are relatives of other family members who are being invited. If you come from a very large family where there's lots of aunts and uncles, usually what I tell people is that the aunts and uncles that you see at every family function, if it's the holidays, if it's birthday parties, Sunday family dinners, whatever it happens to be, if you are seeing those aunts and uncles on a frequent, regular basis, then yes, those are people that you would want to include in your wedding. If you have aunts and uncles that live in other parts of the country that you may not have seen in 5, 10, 15 plus years, and you don't see them outside of maybe someone's wedding, every so often, that's not a reason to invite them. This is a scenario that happens quite a bit. So let's say that dad has a brother that lives local and he attends all the family holidays, any kind of gathering that is had, birthday parties and whatnot. And you see him on a regular basis. And dad has another brother that lives on the other side of the country. No one's been in contact with him. You're only friends on Facebook. You haven't seen him 5, 10, 15, 20 years. He's never come home to attend any functions, and you feel obligated to inviting him because the other brother's invited. There's no rule that says that you need to invite him. In fact, he probably would appreciate you not inviting him because he probably has zero intention of coming home and attending your wedding if he hasn't come home to attend anything else. In fact, he probably is annoyed by the fact that he is getting an invitation because now he just feels obligated to sending a gift that he really doesn't want to send. Okay, let's talk about coworkers. So you've got 2 coworkers, there's 3 others that you work with, but the 2 that you see on lunches and outside of the office on the weekends are excited, they can't wait to come to your wedding, and now you feel obligated because it's an awkward conversation knowing that these other 3 people aren't going to be there, and now you feel like you need to invite them. There's no reason to invite those coworkers. You've never invited them to go to lunch with you, you never invited them outside of work environment to do stuff on the weekend. So why would you invite them to your wedding? It's now more awkward to invite them to your wedding when you don't really know who they are outside of work because you don't do anything with them on the weekends and you don't invite them to lunch. So now all you're doing is inviting them just to save face at the office. There's no reason to invite them. Leave them off the list. Acquaintances. So you've got a mutual friend who has game night at their house and they invite friends from all over. Your mutual friend invites these acquaintances that you see only at game night. They're friends at game night, and outside of game night, you don't talk to them, you don't see them, you know nothing about them. They are not people you invite at your wedding. Let's talk about friends that you haven't stayed in touch with for a year or more. This is somebody you used to work with and used to hang out every other night of the week. You were super close and you did all kinds of things together, and now you've moved on and you've got other things in your life, other friends in your life, and that person and you haven't talked to each other in a year or more. That is not somebody you invite to your wedding. Your neighbors, have you ever hung out with them? Did they ever come over to your house? Have you ever invited them to do anything outside of your wedding? You wouldn't invite them to your wedding. Aunt Patty and Uncle Steve are invited, but we haven't had a connection with their kids in years. No reason to invite those cousins. You and your future spouse are buying a house and have a real estate agent you've been working with for the last 3 or 4 months. Not a reason to invite to your wedding. Okay, when it comes to the guest list, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I usually recommend people do not do. One of those things is when it comes to save the dates. Everyone wants to send a save the date. They want as many people as they can to come celebrate their wedding. That's great and all. However, you never know when things and plans are going to change. And so when you send out a save the date to everyone on your guest list that far in advance, because a lot of times people are sending that out 6 to 8 months or longer, you are locking in an invitation that may need to be rescinded. And it's much harder to explain and rescind an invitation than it is just to not invite. And what I would tell you to do if you really feel obligated to sending save the dates and you really want to ensure that certain people are able to attend your wedding, I would tell you to only send those save the dates to the immediate family and to your closest friends. Leave all the other potential questionable ones to not receiving that save the date, just so that it gives you the flexibility that if plans change or your capacity is reached or your budget is put into jeopardy for some unknown reason, then you're able to have some flexibility and pull back on who all may or may not be invited. So I would not lock yourself into a save the date to everyone on the list. I would, again, simply keep it to the most immediate family, grandparents, that sort of thing, who may need to make sure that that date is reserved and travel plans are made and whatnot from there. when people talk about their A, B, and C list. If they're not on the A list, there shouldn't be a B or C list. They shouldn't be invited. Why would you even have the reserves? And why would anyone want to come to your wedding if they know they didn't get the initial invitation? And if you don't think that people know they didn't get the initial invitation, you are mistaken. Everyone talks and everything is social media. There's so many possibilities that somebody's going to find out that so-and-so is invited and that they didn't get the invitation. And then a couple weeks later, they get an invitation. That is not somebody that I would want to attend somebody's wedding. If I got an invitation after everyone else got an invitation, I would know that I was on the backup list. I'm sorry, if I'm not close enough to you to be on the first list, I'm not coming as a backup either. It's more awkward to invite somebody as a backup than it is just not to invite them at all. When it comes to not inviting people to your wedding, the biggest thing that I hear from people is just that they just don't know what to tell people and why they're not invited. Why do you have to tell anybody anything? There's no explanation that you need to give to anyone as to why they're not invited to your wedding. But if you feel obligated, and I understand there's so much drama when it's wrapped up in the world of weddings, it's just a very simple explanation. We are keeping it limited to our closest family and friends is one explanation. We're on a very tight budget and we're trying to stay within that budget is another explanation. We have a limited capacity at our venue is a very simple conversation to have. But even so, none of those things matter because I don't know if I would ever approach somebody and say, why wasn't I invited to your wedding? Who does that? So there's no perfect answer when it comes to inviting or not inviting guests to your wedding. It is definitely a conversation that needs to be had among everybody involved, and it is going to sometimes lead to disagreements. But at the end of the day, there are two things that I like to remind people of when it comes to guests at your wedding. The first thing I like to remind people of is that your wedding day goes by extremely fast. It's one of the fastest days that you'll ever have. In the blink of an eye, everything that you've been working on for a year plus is over in a very short time frame. And in that time frame, you get from the time that your ceremony ends until the last dance at your wedding, you get a very small window of time to greet all the guests that are at your wedding that would like to speak to you, that you would like to thank for coming, and also try to get all of the things accomplished that you would like to do with your now spouse, whether it be cutting the cake, first dances, speeches, all those things need to be fit into your schedule. So when you have a large group of people who are attending your wedding, you feel obligated, and you should, to go and greet all of those guests that are attending your wedding and thank them for coming and have a meaningful conversation with them. That can go on for hours and hours. And before you know it, it's the end of the night and all the things that you thought you were going to do with your now spouse didn't get accomplished because you're getting pulled away for photos with the photographer, you're cutting the cake, you're doing first dances, all those things. You didn't even get to take time to take a deep breath and to look around and take in the moment. And that is a big regret for many people. And so many people that I have talked to through the years that have large weddings regret having so many people there because all they did throughout their wedding night was talk to people. And many of those people that they talked to were people they really even didn't know because they were invited by other family members, whether it be coworkers or friends of the parents or something to that scenario, because they felt obligated for whatever reason to invite these guests. And the couple didn't even know who they were and felt like they needed to talk to them. So instead of spending intimate time with the people that they truly care about and want to be part of their day, they're talking to people they don't really even know, pretty much strangers. And is that how you want your wedding day to go? The second thing that I remind people of is that when you tally up all the costs that it is going to take to host that wedding, from the chair that they're sitting in, to the napkin they're wiping their face with, to the plate they're eating on, to the meal that's being served to them, to the drinks at the bar. All those costs get factored in. There's a per person rate, right? We already have figured this out if you watch the budgeting video. So at the end of the day, what does that cost? Is it $100 a person? Is it $200 a person? Is it $300 a person? So let's say it's $200. If it's $200 and they're a couple, that's $400 per couple. Do you know that couple well enough to spend $400 on them? Do you like them well enough to want to spend $400 on them? If the answer is no, they shouldn't be invited to your wedding. So at the end of the day, when it comes to the guest list creation, it's so utterly important for you and your future spouse to get on the same page, have those boundaries set, figure out what that list looks like prior to booking anything. So again, you can avoid costly mistakes, going over your budget, reaching the capacity at your venue, all those things that get wrapped into the guest count list. And again, watch sending those save the dates out too soon or to too many people, just in case you need to pivot and change plans from your initial thought process. So this is it when it comes to creating a guest list. I would really love to hear your feedback. This is a topic of conversation that I have frequently with people. So if you have specific questions or you have scenarios that you would like some input on or advice on, please feel free to comment below. I'd be happy to give you my feedback on that. So if this video is helpful for you, please make sure you like, share, follow, all the things you need to do to make sure that you don't miss any of my other videos. I'll see you again in another video.